And what about from a science perspective?
Well, I've always had great colleagues here. And that's, to be serious, that's always, my initial concern about Brexit, by the way, early on, was all my science colleagues. Because what I don't think people realized, and maybe now they do, but Britain gets so much in the way of science because of its connection to Europe. There's money flowing in to support scientific research that's going to disappear. And one of the first things that I thought is, well, in a mercurial sense, I thought, oh, good, this would be a great chance to recruit all our colleagues from Britain because they'll all want to move to the United States. But then we elected Donald Trump, and so it's we've had our own issues. But it's a real problem. But there's a great research establishment. I used to spend time up in Cambridge and almost took a position to succeed my friend Richard Dawkins, actually at Oxford. And it's a position of public understanding of science. And what I didn't want to do, though, was move to Oxford full time, because I think if you're talking about public misunderstanding of science and you don't have a foot in the United States, that's probably the heart of popular misunderstanding of science. Right now, our government is based on misunderstanding of science, and so I didn't want to move full time, and that was a factor. But it's a vibrant and amazing city, and the UK in general. I learned to love it back actually when I was a graduate student. I was up in St. Andrews for a month, and that's before I knew how to golf. I've been back since there, and then 20 years later I went back to lecture there. So I have a long history of throughout the UK, Durham, and it's a great tradition of physics, obviously, and science, and education, and so it's a pleasure to visit. And I try and make sure I interact with colleagues. And we actually filmed, happily, part of The Unbelievers in the Royal Society building, thanks to, at the time, Martin Rees, who we've now done a podcast with, which will appear in a little while, who was the president of the Royal Society, as well as having been head of the Trinity College in Oxford and the Royal Astronomer.
Yeah, it's nice.
Let us film there, and it was a wonderful place to film.
I was at the Royal Society when the Imperial College folks did their presentation on the LSD research, and Professor David Nutt and Robin Carhart Harris and all of the whole crew was there. It's a great place.
It is a neat place, and I was glad they let me and Richard. Well, Richard's a member of the Royal Society. That was, I have to say, as a kind of, and the Canadian, and a sort of maybe a, I'm not sure, an Anglophile in that sense, but if I'd taken, as a Canadian, if I'd taken the job in the UK, I could have been eligible to be in the Royal Society, and that just sounded so good.
That would make your mom happy.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, now it would. My mother was, very unhappy when I decided to become a physicist.
Really? What did she want you to do?
Be a doctor, of course.
Of course.
And in fact, when I was at, I got my first job was it was a pretty prestigious job at Harvard right after I got my PhD, and right after I heard I got that job, I was in Boston at the time, and she phoned my then wife at the time. We'd just gotten married, and I was out of the house, and she said, there's still time to convince him to go to medical school. What's he want to do, get chalk on his hands? Anyway, now she's proud, but for a long time, she wanted my brother to be a lawyer and me to be a doctor. And my brother became a lawyer. In fact, he became worse, he became a professor.